good. And then we are jumping into this series, Everyday Legends, and I want to just set a little bit of a story for you as we launch into this week one of this. So I want to introduce you to three actual historical people who were part of the story we're going to look at today. The first one is a guy named Ahab. And Ahab, for a while, was the king of the nation of Israel. So we're talking several thousand years ago now, but he was the king of the nation of Israel. And the thing about Ahab is he was actually a really evil king. In fact, he's actually described in history as the king up until that time who did more evil than all the other kings before him. So he developed a bad name and reputation for himself. And part of what was evil about Ahab is we're not really talking just about political policy things here with Ahab. Okay, I mean, certainly some of that. But Ahab really made it hard to be a Jesus follower. He actually killed people who were trying to follow God. He was actually bothered, intimidated by them. And instead of following God, he actually would bring in other gods, or he'd have people build other sculptures to be other gods, or he'd let other supposed gods, be brought in from other nations. And he would encourage his nation, the nation of Israel, to worship these gods. And then he would go and really basically torture or kill or get in the way of people who didn't want to do that, who wanted to worship this God of Israel. So Ahab, I mean, he really is evil. Okay, I mean, he's an evil king. He's not just a bad leader; he's an evil king. Okay, well, Ahab, he's married to a lady named Jezebel. And the interesting thing about Jezebel, that Jezebel actually makes Ahab look like an angel. Okay? I mean, Jezebel makes Ahab look like he should get nominated for all good citizenship awards. Okay? Jezebel is also very corrupt, but she's very manipulative, very controlling, very divisive, very power hungry, very hateful. There's actually in the spiritual world, there's actually a spirit called the spirit of Jezebel, actually named after her, where sometimes people still really struggle with those types of qualities, and it can be remarkably destructive. And so she would even be manipulative and controlling of Ahab, her husband. And she was hateful. She literally was killing people over this tension between which God to serve. Okay. So that's Ahab and Jezebel. I mean, it's bad. And just to give you, I can't really paint the picture of how bad, but if you think the conditions of the world today are bad, or if you're in a camp, it's hey, the nation's bad or whatever else, just take it, and maybe it is, and just take it and multiply it by hundreds or thousands, maybe even multiply it by millions. And you're starting to get how bad it was to live in this day. It is broken, and it is dangerous. Okay? And so you got Ahab and you got Jezebel, and then you have this third person that's part of the story we're going to look at today, is a guy named Elijah. And you might be familiar with the name Elijah. Elijah was a prophet of God, and let's just talk about what a prophet really is, so maybe we can just kind of put some handles on it. A prophet of God would do a couple things. One, a prophet of God would absolutely sometimes be inspired by God to talk about the future, to predict or tell what was coming in the future, what God was going to do in the future. That's absolutely a role that prophets often played. But more often than that, probably, what prophets did that oftentimes can get overlooked is prophets were inspired by God to speak truth into a current circumstance in somebody's life, and in this case, into a nation or a movement or a cultural time. And so Elijah is a prophet. He's like a spokesperson of God in this time, which sounds really cool, right? Until you remember that Ahab and Jezebel are leading, okay? Which means it's not a very fun time to be a prophet, okay? This is not, say, if you were a prophet and the king was good and the king was godly and following God's way, you got to take all sorts of encouraging words to the king. If you're the prophet when Ahab and Jezebel are leading, you're trying not to hear God at all. Just don't talk to me. I don't want to have anything to go say because it's going to be hard, right? This is a rough job description for Elijah. Okay? But Elijah does it. He lives it. It's remarkably dangerous, and we'll talk about that some. At times, he's actually running around the country hiding, okay, to save his own life. But here he is. He's living inside of this tension. And here's what you got to know about Elijah, though. Because we can start hearing the word prophet. It's like, oh, he's a prophet, and it's evil times, and he's going to do something great. And And Elijah absolutely does experience some of the miraculous. But Elijah is also a human, just like you and me. In fact, a few thousand years after Elijah's time on earth is done, James, the half-brother of Jesus, writes a historical letter to some of the churches in the first century. And in that letter, he celebrates something about Elijah, but he describes Elijah as a human just like us. He's a human just like us. So we're going to lean in to this story of Elijah and what he does while his nation is being led by Ahab and Jezebel. But you got to keep reminding yourself all throughout this story, Elijah is a human just like me. Elijah is a human. Listen, Elijah is just like you, and you are just like Elijah. Okay? Elijah is just like you, and you are just like Elijah. Elijah is a human just like us. Elijah is a human just like us. Just say that with me. Here we go. Elijah is a human just like us. Okay, that's what's true about Elijah. Now, if you want to start turning in a Bible or scrolling on a phone, or if you want to Google this or something, we're going to be in 1 Kings chapter 19. 1 Kings chapter 19, Old Testament, your Bible, and we're going to intersect this story where these three people all come together. But let me give you, while you're turning there, flipping or finding on your phone, let me give you just a little context. So Elijah is this prophet. This is the king, Ahab and Jezebel, and there's been some conflict, right? Because Ahab and Jezebel are very much about all the other gods that they're constructing and that they're building, all the other gods of all the other nations. Elijah's this representation of God on the earth and God's spokesman. And so there become these battles that happen, right? These spiritual battles and sometimes literally these physical battles. Well, in one of these, in the chapter or so before where we're going to jump in, it kind of comes to a head, and there's this moment where on top of a mountain, there are 700 prophets of Baal, which is the general term for all these other gods, the gods of all these other nations, right? All these constructed gods and figurative gods, right? These gods of Baal, there's 700 of them, these prophets, and there's Elijah. And Elijah's like, okay, look, enough is enough. Let's just see whose God is really God. Let's build some altars, and you pray to your gods and ask your gods to burn up the altar. Okay, you have them light fire. And then I'll do the same, and we'll just kind of see how this goes, okay? Now, again, it's 700 to 1 people speak. That's a risky proposition, okay? But Elijah says, okay, you go ahead and pray first. So the 700 prophets of Baal, they start praying to their gods. They're calling out to their gods. Now, the challenge is their gods aren't real, so nothing's really happening. And Elijah kind of stands back, and in a moment or two, he's actually even teasing them. Like, where are they? Are they busy? At one point, he even kind of just generally teases them a little bit and says, maybe they're in the bathroom. Okay, maybe they're really occupied. Okay, there's this moment here, and nothing's happening. And finally, there's enough of that, right? They're cutting them. I mean, it's just awful. And then Elijah says, okay, I'm going to pray to my God, but before I do that, I'm going to drench the altar. So it'd be big enough if God just appeared out of nowhere and lit the altar on fire. But I'm going to flood this thing with water. I'm going to put water all around it. It's going to be drenched just to prove it's harder to light wet wood. You know, so he does that. And then he calls out to his God, says, God, light this on fire. Show who you really are. And God does it. I mean, there's a supernatural occurrence. The miraculous happens in front of all of these people, right? There's no question. There's no debate left. There's no quandary. There's no wonder. God has done the supernatural on behalf of Elijah and to try and capture the nation of Israel's attention again. Now, the challenge is there's still 700 of these prophets left, and oftentimes in history, the spiritual war would become this physical war, and Elijah ends up having to kill by himself these 700 of these prophets. And he does not do it out of joy. He does not do it out of delight. He does it with great anguish, great inner turmoil. There's no delight in that. There's no glamorizing of what happens in that moment. And so you can imagine, here's Elijah. He's had this great moment. Are you kidding me, God? Look what you just did. Now he's had this low moment of just doing something so emotionally painful and traumatizing. So literally in back-to-back breaths, he's got this experience, right? And while he's killed 700 prophets, Ahab and Jezebel are still alive and well. So here's Elijah. Big victory, painful victory, significant danger still in play. It'd probably be understandable, right, if we just acknowledge that Elijah was tired and threatened. He's tired And he's threatened. He's exhausted from what he's just been a part of, and he's threatened by who is still out there. And here's what's interesting is I just think that we could relate a lot to Elijah right now. And that isn't it fair to say that many of us, for many reasons, definitely feel tired and maybe in some ways feel threatened. Like something that you always thought was true is maybe not true. Something you always thought was strong is maybe a little weaker than you thought. Something that you always thought was going to be a firm foundation is maybe not the foundation. Maybe it's crumbling. Something that you had maybe put a little more hope in than it was worthy of is now a little bit questionable. And so you feel a little threatened, and we feel a little tired because of all that we've been through. Let's just be candid with one another, even as the church, even as Journey. I mean, we've been knocked back a little bit. We've been knocked back a little bit in the last 14, 15 months, but we could be honest with each other and just say we were knocked back a little bit before that. We didn't have a fire on a mountain and a great move of God. We had a fire in a building we were trying to move into. That hit just a little bit differently. And coming out of that, there was this 20-month journey through painful insurance process and trying to have all these people as we tried to launch Middleville. It just knocked us back a little bit. And then right after that comes this dynamic we've lived in for the last 14 or 15 months. And it's okay sometimes to just acknowledge, just to pull back and say, back a little bit and say, you know what? I'm a little bit tired and I'm a little bit threatened. Some of you in the last 14 or 15 months have lost significant friendships. You've been hurt by people you never thought would hurt you. You've been disappointed by people that you relied on or that you looked up to. You've been disappointed maybe by the church or how the church is handled. The church is an organization or individuals in the church, and you haven't agreed with every response. And you've wrestled with that, and you're a little bit fatigued. You're just heart fatigued by it, and you're a little bit threatened because you wonder, wait a minute, what does this really mean for us, and what does this really mean for me? It's okay sometimes just to step back for a second and acknowledge maybe we're a little tired and maybe we feel a little threatened. Elijah does, and again, he's a human just like us. Let's look at his story, because I think we'll see a couple things that happen. So in 1 Kings chapter 19, we're going to start reading in verse 1. So on the heels of this great moment and these 700 prophets that were killed and Ahab and Jezebel still alive, 19 verse 1. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel, and all of that anger and all of that hatred and all of that control and manipulation, she sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I don't kill you like you've had to kill them. Your life's on the line. There's a bounty on your head, Elijah. Verse 3, Elijah was afraid. Elijah was afraid. Just say afraid. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? He's afraid. Elijah was afraid, and so he ran for his life. Let's just back up for a second. Wait a second. Didn't he just watch God do the unthinkable? Didn't he just watch God display all of his power and burn up an altar while the other altar didn't burn? Didn't he just watch God give him strength to defeat 700 men? What is he afraid of? If that's you, what are you afraid of? Well, he's tired, and he's threatened. And when we're tired and we're threatened, often we think illogically. When we're tired and when we're threatened, often we think illogically. We know that the risk of fatigue, right? I mean, you've heard the studies, right, of how dangerous it is to drive at certain fatigue levels. You can actually get yourself in trouble just driving when you're so tired, right? Certain jobs, you've got to clock out after certain amounts of hours, just for the safety of you and the people around you. I mean, right? There's just a window there in which we understand that fatigue can do weird things to us. And when we're tired and we're threatened, we live illogically. I find myself wondering, 5 years from now, what am I going to look back at in my life in the last 15 months and wonder, what in the world was I thinking? Why did I say that? Why did I think that? Why did I respond to that? Why did I not respond to that? Why did I draw that line in the sand? Why did I not draw this? What was I thinking? Why did I accidentally cut off that group of people? How did I end up canceling that group? Why did I adopt so deeply that cause? Why did I ignore this cause? Why did I? Every now and then, friends, when the time is tough and the tough time is long, there's just some wisdom in stepping back and asking, is there any place in my life I'm thinking illogically? Where I'm just a little tired and I'm a little threatened, and I know when I'm a little tired and I'm a little threatened, sometimes I think illogically. Where could that be true? Where is it just a healthy question for us? Look what else Elijah does while he's on the run. We'll jump back in, middle of verse 4. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there. You got to catch that. He left his servant. He's got this right-hand person, okay? And he's going to leave him there. While he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush. He sat down under it, and he prayed that he might die. He's not thinking logically. I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. He's thinking illogically because he's tired and he's threatened. But I want you to see something. Elijah had this servant, and when the going got really challenging for Elijah, when he's tired and he's threatened, and he runs and he leaves the servant, and then he goes a day into the wilderness by himself. And here's what I understand. I understand there are times that we need to be alone. There are times that we need to push in and pursue God on our own. There are times that we need that. And Jesus modeled that for us, right? But there are also times we need to keep the people closest to us. There are times, even Jesus in the garden, what did he say to his disciples while Jesus is praying in agony before the cross? When Jesus is at the hardest of moments, he's pleading with his disciples not to get away, but to stay awake. This is hard. I'm tired. I'm staring down something. I'm threatened. I'm getting ready to give my life. Please stay awake and pray with me. Please stay awake and be with me. Elijah does the opposite. In the moment of his greatest need, he cuts off the person closest to him. And again, Elijah is a human just like us. And I think we understand because when we are tired and threatened, we often live isolated. You and I often do the same thing. We often live isolated. Now, I want to talk about this just for a second. Here's the thing, friends. We've talked a lot in church and in culture and society in general about how the last year plus have been very isolating. And it's true. And I want to lovingly say to us, we chose that. We are as isolated as we have chosen to be. And you might say, yeah, but we had to stay home and we had to, look, I understand it. I understand it. But there were always options to fight to not be isolated. Were they the best options and were they old options? Were they the options we've been used to for the last 100 years? Nope, they weren't. But were they available? Yup, they were. Was Zoom great? Nope, hate it, don't care if I'm ever on it again. Will be this week for 2.5 hours straight tomorrow. Pray for me, okay? But is it available? So I understand the pressure. I think we just need to pull back and say, look, when we're tired and we're threatened, we also have a part to play. And the only way we're going forward is if we quit casting all the blame and take a little bit of the responsibility. And I love you still. Okay? Now listen, there are a couple ways that we've gotten isolated in this time of great fatigue and what can feel like great threats. One is we've gotten isolated as in like alone, like just us or maybe just our family. And most of us didn't even intend for that to happen. That wasn't the intention. Okay, we thought we were going to be kind of cooped up for 4 weeks. And it was awesome for 4 weeks for most people. Okay. But it's like we kind of got isolated and we got hunkered in and we did it because we wanted to be safe and we wanted to be wise. And again, all good. Like again, we've had all sorts of grace with one another as we've tried to navigate this journey. But we got a little isolated. And now we're trying to reemerge. And we're feeling some of the weight of that because we were in a situation we don't know how to handle. And now we're having to have a lot of conversations about how to reemerge and how to reengage and how to push through social anxiety and how to push through fears we didn't have 15 months ago and how to push through challenges that we didn't come up with. We're trying to, we've created that a little bit. And again, no shame, no guilt. We would just do well to acknowledge what we're in. The second way we get a little isolated, and the way we've gotten really isolated in this time, is we get isolated in a group. It's like, wait, how's it possible to get isolated in a group? We get isolated in a group where everybody talks like us, thinks like us, and sounds like us. Everybody talks like us, thinks like us, sounds like us. The most life-giving question some of us could ask today is, when's the last time I had a meaningful conversation with somebody who doesn't think like me, sound like me, talk like me? We've gotten pushed, and listen. We've gotten pushed into that, and we got around people who all agree with us, because that's kind of where society pushed us, and that's where all the algorithms on your social media push you. Okay, but everything is pushing us there, and we got boxed into that, and now we think we're deeply connected when the reality is we're just isolated in a pod where everybody's the same. And I just got to tell you why. That was never Jesus. We can't ever find that in Jesus' life. In fact, the 12 disciples that Jesus called were the most diverse group of people you could possibly imagine. Some of whom wanted to kill each other before Jesus got them together and sorted that out, right? Okay. But it's easy. We get inside this little echo chamber, and the echo chambers right now are very loud. And it's affirming because everybody agrees with us. It's less tiring because everybody agrees with us. We don't have to do any work of deep and meaningful conversation. And it has zero impact. And listen, all of that is intoxicating, and it's toxic. It is intoxicating. It feels really good because in this group, you're always right. But it is also toxic because you are always right. It's just easy to get isolated. And Elijah does it. And I get it. Listen, I understand. We're tired and we feel like some things that matter to us are being threatened. But we've got to take really intentional efforts to push out of this. We've got to take really intentional efforts to get outside of some of those conversations. Now, here's the good news. While Elijah waves some flags for us and says, look, just watch what's happening here. There's also a beautiful part of Elijah's story that in some pain, honestly, there's a recovery road. There's a recovery road. And I'm just telling you, we need the recovery road. I'm just telling you, whether or not you know it or not, you need the recovery road. And I'm just telling you, whether you know it or not, we collectively need the recovery road. We need to acknowledge that sometimes we are not thinking logically and that we are isolating. And in our isolating on our own or in groups, we have accidentally sometimes caused damage to people. We have broken relationships. We have severed things. We have canceled groups of people that we never would have intended to cancel. We've made it hard for people to re-engage because of lines we've drawn in the sand that weren't worthy of any type of energy to begin with. And we've got to just pull back and just acknowledge it. And then let's see the way forward. Let's pick it back up with Elijah's story. Pick up in verse 5. Then he lay down under the bush and he fell asleep. That's a good man. When you're tired, take a nap. That's really good. All at once, an angel touched him and said, get up and eat. He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and he drank, and then he lay down again. And the angel came back again, a second time, and touched him and said, get up and eat. For the journey that's in front of you, it's too much for you to do it on your own. You need lots of energy and strength. So he got up and he ate and he drank, and he strengthened by that food. He traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. And there he went into the cave and he spent the night. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah, hey, Elijah, what are you doing here? And I love Elijah's candor in his response. Listen, God, I've been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. But the Israelites, they've rejected you. They've rejected your covenant in all your ways. They've torn down all your altars. They put your prophets to death with the sword. I'm the only one left. You ever feel like the only one left? You know you're tired and threatened when you're the only one left. Do you ever feel like the little group that you found yourself in is the only group thinking straight? It's a sign we're in trouble. It's like I'm the only one left. And now they're trying to kill me, which is true. They were trying to kill him. And the Lord said, hey, Elijah, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore through the mountain, tore it apart, and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord wasn't in that wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord wasn't in that earthquake either. After the earthquake, there came a fire, which that's where Elijah knew to see God, because that's what happened before. But nope, the Lord wasn't in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. And when Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face, and he went out, and he stood at the mouth of the cave. Isn't it really cool? And we talk about this a lot, like God shows up in the whisper. Like God's close enough he can whisper. It's really cool, and it's really meaningful, and it's really valuable. But can I just tell you that on the road to recovery, what's more valuable than that whisper? There's something that precedes that whisper. It is one thing, and it is a gift to hear God. And God is a communicator. And we say this all the time. You can hear God. God is communicating with you. But what becomes before God hearing is part of the recovery. We recover when we listen for God. We recover when we listen for God. Listen, we're listening before we hear. Elijah's listening in the earthquake, not there. He's listening in the storm, not there. He's listening in the fire, not there. He's listening in the whisper. There he is. Listening leads to hearing. Listening leads to hearing. And here's Elijah like, okay, I'm going to listen. I am tired. I am threatened. I've gotten myself on my own. I feel like I'm the only one. And I've in some ways made myself the only one. I haven't cut my servant off. I've experienced this pinnacle moment with God, but now my life is in danger. But I'm still going to listen. Hey, friends, we're going to be people who listen for God first. We're going to be people who listen. I love a good plan. I love a good strategy. We have some. You probably have some for your life. But we begin with listening. We don't begin presuming what we will hear or how we will hear God. We don't begin by presuming the way in which he will speak or the way in which he will communicate. That is a surefire way to miss him. But we'll just listen. We're willing to say, God, I'm just going to do my best to hear. God, what are you doing? What are you saying? Where can I see you? That's part of Elijah's recovery. The hearing is medicine to his soul, but the listening was part of what got him there. I mean, here's the question. Are you willing to listen? Are you willing to listen? He might speak through other people. He might speak through a moment. He might speak through a song. He might speak reading through Proverbs this week. He might speak through something that happens in your workplace this week or in a conversation. God's limitless in the ways he can. He might speak in the quietness of your soul. But would you listen? It's part of how we recover. Now let's listen to the rest of this conversation a little bit. Then a voice said to him, okay, Elijah, what are you doing here? And I love Elijah. He's like, God, in case you didn't hear me the first time, I heard you, but in case you didn't hear me, let me repeat myself. I've been very zealous for the Lord Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, and they tore down your altars, and they put your prophets to death by the sword. I'm the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too. God says back to him, verse 15, go back the way you came and go to the desert of Damascus. When you get there, anoint Hazael king over Aram, anoint Jehu, a son of Nimshi, king over Israel. I'm going to put new leadership in place, Elijah. I've seen you. There's a new day coming. Anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, son of Abel, Mahola, to succeed you as prophet. Elijah, I'm trying to help you think about what's next. There's a new leader coming after you. There's a new king coming after Ahab. There's a new day coming. I'm trying to help you see there is a way forward in this. Jehu will put to death all who escape the sword of Hazael, and Elijah will put to death all those who escape Jehu. Yet I reserve, check this out, I reserve 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed down to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him. Elijah felt like he was the only one left, and all this time God had 7,000 more. Please hear me today. Please just hear God say to you that regardless of what you're in or up against or trying to accomplish, you are not the only one. You are not alone. Regardless of what relationship you're trying to save or redeem or get back on the tracks, what financial hole you're trying to dig out of, what cause you're trying to advance, you're not alone. It may feel like you're alone. It may look like you're alone. But what if God's got a 7,000 for you too? Just gives Elijah all this encouragement in this. So Elijah went from there and he found Elisha, son of Shaphat, and he was plowing the 12 yoke of oxen. He himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up to him and threw his cloak around him. And Elisha left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, hey, let me kiss my mom and dad goodbye, and then I'm going to come to you and I'll follow you. Go back, Elijah replied. What have I done to you? Elijah knows how hard it is to really serve in this role of prophet. And he's like, oh no, you're the guy, but what have I done? Do you really want to do this? So Elijah left him and he went back. He took his yoke of oxen, he slaughtered them, he burned the plowing equipment, he took the meat and he gave it to the people and they ate. And then he set out to follow Elijah and he became his servant. He became his servant. So Elijah listens and then hears, and then he goes and does what God says, and he re-engages in a meaningful relationship. He re-engages in kind of a right-hand person, a God-shaped, God-centered relationship for the purpose of restoring the nation, of moving the kingdom of God forward, of moving the goodness of God forward. And that's all part of how we recover. Listen, it's one part for us to recover by listening for God. But the second part that we see in Elijah is we recover when we fiercely fight for life-giving community and the life-giving mission. We recover when we fiercely fight for life-giving community and life-giving mission, the life-giving mission of Jesus. Here's the thing. Elijah went back and he got Elisha because that's who God gave him to. And that's part of how we re-engage this thing, to say, okay, where's the life-giving community? Now, again, let me just talk for a minute to us, okay? Let's just have a little bit of like a family moment, okay? As we recover, we've got to be really intentional about these two things. These two things do not happen by default. In fact, the natural tendency is to drift away from them. But one of the questions we need to begin to ask is where is my life-giving community? Who are my life-giving friendships with? Not exclusively, but I want to be with people who Jesus is trying to reach and all of that. We'll talk about that. But who's my life-giving community? Let me help you understand what a life-giving relationship looks like. A life-giving relationship is centered on the person of Jesus who is life-giving himself. It is not centered on what political thing you agree or disagree on. It is not centered on what cause you are for or not. Those might be parts of the relationship, but a life-giving relationship is first and foremost centered on, do we have the person of Jesus in common? Because when it is, listen to me, when it is, what we do is we allow ourselves the opportunity then to correct one another in that relationship with Jesus, to support one another, to receive accountability from each other, to encourage each other forward, and it keeps us pliable. Part of the damage of isolation has been we're not accountable to each other anymore. We have repeaters in our life, not truth tellers in our life. We need people in our lives who bring both grace and truth to us. People who only repeat what you say are not grace and truth in your life. We've got to fight to re-engage life-giving community. And let me tell you what that's going to mean. That's going to mean a lot of forgiveness and a lot of grace. It's going to mean a lot of truth-filled conversation. It's going to mean a lot of awkward conversations. It's going to mean a lot of forgiveness of people that you'll actually never see again because they've moved on to something else in your life or they've moved away. They don't even live near you or something. And there's still going to have to be this choice to forgive because we're going to live from a life-giving place. I'm just telling you. It's not going to be the easiest thing ever. But it's part of how we recover. It's part of how we get through the feeling of tired and threatened. We're gonna have to offer lots of apologies. We're gonna have to, right? I get it. For some of you, you're going to have to work through forgiving the church or the umbrella of the church or what you kind of view as the institution, whatever that means to you, you're going to have to work through kind of forgiving that. The primary barrier between you and Jesus is always going to be bitterness. If you want to slide something in that's a guaranteed barrier, it's bitterness. So we come back to this thing. Now, let me just let me just talk a little bit about this re-engagement thing. Let me just talk for a minute for those of you who are online or have been largely online, or maybe if you're in the room, you're just kind of gradually starting to re-engage in physical gatherings, and that's great, whatever. Here's the thing. There's a couple groups of us. One group, and maybe you're still online, maybe even today, you've been online largely for health and safety reasons. You've thought that is the wise thing for you in your circumstance, your life to do. And we will continue to have all sorts of grace and kindness for one another in that. There is zero shame and guilt. Zero. But I want to be candid and say one of the things we're having to navigate is how we now work through what for some, not for all, but what for some is a little bit of that social anxiety, that social fear about re-engaging. And I'm just telling you now, both online and in the room, we're going to have all sorts of grace and patience and kindness for each other in that. We're going to walk that road together. We've never been here before. But we're going to walk that together. And I just want to say to most of you, it's time. It's time to re-engage. But we want to re-engage around these life-giving relationships. Now, the second group, and this is kind of funny because this is a conversation that's been coming up, and so far, everybody who's had the conversation, they've told me. I haven't called anybody out on this yet, but it's funny, I've had several of these in the last probably 3 weeks. People just looked at me or called me or something, and it's like, I know, like, I'm not at home for anything to do with COVID. I just have a really bad habit now. I just like, and some of them can't even look at me. Like, I have a bad habit. Like, and I'm like, tend to merits, go to your, I don't even know. Why are you not looking at me? It's not my thing, right? But I just want to lovingly say to you what you've already said to me. It's time to break the bad habit. It's time to break the bad habit. Because it is isolating. So just come on. Caledonia, Middleville, wherever it is you're engaging, right? Those of you who've been joining us online from other parts of the country, even some of you around the world, it's time to engage in your local community. Grab a place where you find life-giving relationship. And the second piece of this, the life-giving mission. Let's be real clear. The mission of Jesus has not moved 1 millimeter in the last 15 months. It is still to seek and save the lost. It is still to help as many people as possible experience more life in Jesus. It has not moved. The mission of Jesus is still about people. The mission of Jesus, I love you. The mission of Jesus is still not about your political cause. It's still not. It's still first and primarily about populating heaven and limiting the population of hell. That is the mission. It's not our mission. We didn't invent it. We only exist because Jesus had this mission, so he made us to fulfill it. And so that's what we're going to be after. Which means this. Those of you online considering and kind of getting ready to re-engage physically or whatever, those of you in the room, those of you who have come from other churches because of something that happened at that church during COVID and you didn't like whatever. Let me just be clear. Look, we just got to be sure we're on the same page here, okay? This is our mission. And we're not trying to get back to church the way it was before, whatever that means to you. We have zero interest in that. And here's why. Because if we're really candid, we were living the mission, but not as fully as we could. And if COVID season has done anything to us, it's rattled the cage a little bit to help us see some of the distractions that we had picked up before and to see the distractions we do not want to pick up now. So we're not trying to go back. We talked about this way back in August, right? Better is greater than back. We're going better. We're going more mission focused. We're going more unleashed to reach people with the story of Jesus. We're going more passionately consumed with unleashing our gifts. We're going more passionately addicted to life-giving relationships and the life-giving mission of Jesus. We're not trying to get back to something that we think it was. We're trying to say it's a new day. And the God of all time does a new thing, and he's doing a new thing with us. So that's what we're about. So the question for us becomes, where do I engage this life-giving community, and where do I need to move in the mission? Even like inside these walls of dream, where do I need to engage? Where do I need to engage in helping move the mission forward? Outside the walls, in the communities that we live in, where do I need to engage the mission? Where do I need to give myself away? Where do I need to partner with Jesus to seek and save the lost and take more life to more people? Where do I need to lay myself down and get myself out of the way? Where do I need, listen, we cannot come back. We are not trying to return to something that allows any of us to be consumers of the church. It's impossible for us to be consumers of the church because we are the church. Listen, we're not trying to get back to a place where you get to be a customer of the kingdom. You are the kingdom. We're trying to say, how do we live that more fully? How do we shake off old distractions? How do we avoid new ones? You are the kingdom. You're the light on the hill that can't be hidden. You are the salt of the earth. You are filled with the power of the Holy Spirit to reach the lost. That's you. That's us. So we got to be real careful here in our tiredness and our threatedness to not say, if I could just get back. No, the road to recovery is to say, I'm going to re-engage truly life-giving community, and I will fight to re-engage the singular mission of Jesus. That's what we're doing. And in case you weren't sure, that means a lot to me. And it means a lot to us. We've always... Now here's the thing with Elijah, right? That can help us live this. This is what can help us. You got all these moves of Elijah, right? But Elijah has this quality that makes him an everyday legend that's available to you and it's available to me. And I want to give you the quality and to give it a little context. The quality that Elijah had that's an everyday legend is the quality he had is vulnerability. He's had all this vulnerability. But we've got a really warped definition of vulnerability in culture, and there's probably got 50 definitions of culture. Let me help you understand what we're talking about. Vulnerability is two things. It's an openness with God. It's just a candor with God. You heard it from Elijah so much that he repeated himself. You didn't get it the first time, okay? It's an openness with God. It's full openness. Vulnerability is full openness, and then it is full obedience. We are not really vulnerable with God until we are willing to be obedient with God. If all we want is openness, then we just want a sounding board and a venting platform. And God will be that. He'll hang around forever. But I'm just telling you straight up right now, you will never be fulfilled and you will never find the healing you're looking for in that. It will always come up short. That, my friends, is a portion of empty religion. And God's like, I want you to have life. Vulnerability, it's an openness and an obedience. Full openness. Full obedience. So the question for us, would we be vulnerable? Would we tell God where we feel tired, where maybe we need his help, where we thought illogically, or maybe we've isolated, unintentionally or intentionally? It doesn't matter. There's no shame or guilt in it. We're just acknowledging it to God. And God, I'm going to listen so that I can hear what you're inviting, so I can be fully obedient. Fully open, fully obedient. Because Elijah was a human, just like us. Elijah was a human, just like us. Elijah was a human just like us. Jesus, we need your help in it. We fully admit we need your help. There are so many distractions. We need your help. Would you help us even today, God? Even today, would you help us be people who would listen? And would you help us be people who, if we're going to draw a line in the sand on anything, would you help us be a group of people today who would draw a line in the sand and say, I'm going after, whatever it takes, I'm going after life-giving, Jesus-centered relationships that will help me live the life-giving mission, that will help me then have healthy, vibrant, contagious relationships with people around me who don't yet know you, that will help me give myself away for the sake of the world around me, that will help me be loving towards people who don't agree with me, who don't look like me, who don't act like me, who don't think like me. Would you help us, Jesus, to be vulnerable with you and vulnerable with one another? Would you give us a courage to allow each other to hold each other accountable, to be people of both grace and truth to one another? Jesus, we desperately need you in this. Left to our own devices, we will run the other direction from this. And if we don't run, we will drift. So we acknowledge, part of our openness is acknowledging we need your help. But thank you for the invitation to continue to live for something greater. Thank you for Elijah, who is a person. I love that you capture such raw, real stories all throughout the scripture. We can see the supernatural, like Elijah. We can see it. And we can also feel tired and threatened and push back a little bit. But I thank you that you give us a way to recover. So we're asking for your help in these things because we commit ourselves to you, to your fame, to your kingdom, and to the goodness and the glory of your name. We pray these things and we surrender ourselves to you in Jesus' name and strength. Amen, everybody.